Well, hi there. So, I've been asked to make a little promotional video about my new book, which is called Archaeological Boundaries, Discussions, Experiments and Unprovoked Attacks. It's a unusual book. It's coming out as a digital imprint, published by Robert Chappell, which is a new project for him, going into digital publishing. The origins of the book are a bit strange. A few years ago I was contacted by a different publisher looking for a manuscript, and I said I didn't have anything ready to go at that point, but we discussed a few ideas, and I was given a really free remit to write any sort of book really, and I did. I went off and I wrote a book, the sort of book that I would want to read perhaps, and unfortunately the publisher, I think he felt that I went a little bit off the wall, a little bit too wayward with it. And as I say, this is the book that I wanted to write, not with, normally when you're writing, you're writing for a particular publisher and you're writing with a certain audience in mind. And I felt that I was freed up to just produce and see what happened. So anyway, the book ended up not happening. Myself and Robert kept working on it for a few years, and now we've got a finished manuscript which we're presenting. The book's divided up into three parts. The first part is about the development and challenges facing commercial archaeology, rescue archaeology in front of developments. Mostly based in Ireland, but with some content that's more widely applicable. And it considers various aspects of that. There's a chapter just detailing the development of commercial archaeology in Ireland, another one looking at the effects on the way the jobs are organised on the staff and how that might impact on them negatively. There's another chapter about how archaeology has been criticised in Ireland, how we became the focus of a lot of negative comments, and there's sort of an assessment of those, what was stated, what was true and what was untrue, and why they happened, and that's quite an interesting chapter. And then finally there's a short piece on the union issue and the development of an archaeological branch of the Unite trade union in Ireland. And also that sort of links into some interesting stuff about Gordon Childe, what he wrote before he started writing archaeology, what he wrote about labour organising, and in particular his very enthusiastic writing about the industrial workers of the world, one of the early industrial unions. And in fact, although far less radical, Unite is an industrial union in that sense, that it represents workers across a broad spectrum rather than being a craft or a trade union. The second part of the book, it contains a series of experiments. They're rather playful papers, or I hope they're supposed to be quite playful. They're looking at different applications of archaeological theory. They're not entirely serious, but they are quite good reads, I think. There's a chapter on using the William Burroughs, Brian Gyson cut-up technique to generate new archaeological ideas, sort of a randomising text process. That's quite fun. There's a chapter on applying archaeological techniques to the study of contemporary dance music, which is an experiment in a couple of senses, because it's me trying to engage in something that I've been quite critical of elsewhere, which is contemporary archaeology. And I feel that a lot of contemporary archaeological projects really are archaeologists talking about their hobbies and using archaeological terminology, but maybe not actually doing anything that's recognisably archaeological. Now, I know that's not a very popular opinion with the contemporary archaeology crowd, and hopefully if any of them read this particular paper, they'll understand more about what I mean. I think my conclusion to that is that yes, you can, if you really focus on the archaeological techniques, you can do some interesting work in those sort of areas. There's another chapter in there that's about using the phenomenological approaches to studying a modern recreation of Stonehenge. Now again, that's partly a piece of criticism. It's me playing around with ideas that I'm not necessarily 100% comfortable with, i.e. phenomenology. I'm finding that in this particular circumstance, in this illegal recreation of Stonehenge that was built in Ireland, that there is more to learn by using the phenomenological approaches than just a traditional archaeological approach. It's more of an entertaining paper than anything serious, but I think it reads well. The last section of the book is more like traditional archaeology. It contains a series of papers. Oh, the other experiment, the fourth paper in the experimental part, is a paper about using anarchic anthropology, this sort of study of decentralized political units that's becoming very popular in anthropology, and using some of the political theory that was developed in the late 19th century and early 20th century about the political anarchist movement, and using some of those ideas to examine archaeological subjects. So again, that's kind of an early days report. It's supposed to be a good read. The final section is more like traditional archaeology. It's me working on a series of topics that I've done conventional work on, and just going that a little bit further, mostly involving settlement patterns, prehistoric settlement patterns, and looking at the phenomenon of villages in some detail. Villages, prehistoric villages, Neolithic and Bronze Age ones, is something that I've written quite a bit about and done quite a lot of work on. So these are some of the papers that sort of complete that work and finish that off. There's also another chapter that looks at the settlement patterns, specifically using those anarchist or anarchic methodologies that I discussed in part 2, and really showing an application of those. So that's what's in the book. There's 12 papers and an introduction that talks about the way the digital world, the digital realm, has changed the way that we can write archaeology, and where it might go in the next few years, over the next decade. It's quite an optimistic piece. I've got a lot of hope for digital archaeology in one sense or another, and this book is part of that. It's my offering to this, these new developments, and the ability of writers to get away from the peer-reviewed journals, which are very, very worthy and not, there's nothing inherently wrong with them. They tend to promote quite conservative archaeology, and that, at the end of the day, is what this book is about. It's about some less conservative approaches to archaeology. Anyway, it's free, so you can download a copy for free. You can also pay for it. We've given you that option, and it would be lovely to think that some of you might read the book and think, actually that was worth some money, and go back and pay some money towards it. But it doesn't matter. I'd rather have people reading the book than making any money off of this. And other than that, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you think that the work that went into this, which has been quite considerable, was worth it. And maybe if you ever want to send me an email or find me on Facebook or whatever and tell me which bits you liked or you didn't like, I'd love to hear from any of you. Okay.